Hi kids, for this video we are on the Zhou Dynasty. So that one can either be Zhou or like Zhou. That's what these two make here. So these are from 1027 to 256 BC. So we are going to start off with culture and society. So the culture and society for the Zhou dynasty is very similar to the life during the Shang dynasty. So what that means is they're the things that they have created, so they still are very equipped with bronze metalworking, with silk weaving, with complex pottery. They still have social classes like the nobles, the artisans, the priests, the slaves. They still have it in that triangular shape. When it comes to their government, it is also very similar to the Shang dynasty. One of them, or similar things such as having a king and them being the one who leads. The only major difference, however, or one of the major differences, is that under the Zhou rule, there was more centralized control by the king. If you guys remember in the Shang dynasty, there was one king. However, there were relatives like cousins and brothers who helped take over all of the land in his name. Here, it's mostly just him. He tries to take over absolutely everything. He tries not to give other individuals as much power or close to having enough power, just like as he does. They also rule with the mandate of heaven. If you guys remember, that the mandate of heaven is pretty much saying that that family or that ruler has permission from the gods to rule as if, or to rule if they governed properly and fairly. So this family or this king had mandate of heaven if it ruled properly and fairly. So that's how they justified their rule. The Zhou dynasty weakened in later centuries due to. So this one lasted. I'm going to pause a little quick because I'm going to see if you guys can do the math. So if they started at 1027 BC and they ended in 256 BC, how long did this dynasty last? So I'm gonna pause, or like I'm gonna pause real quick and see if you guys can figure it out. So they started in 1027 BC and they ended in 256 BC. If you need to pause me because I'm about to tell you guys. All right, so this dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, lasted about 771 years. So after 771 years, it was weakened. So after those years, there were a few things that happened that caused this dynasty to pretty much collapse. So one of them was ineffective rulers. So even though they stated that they had the mandate of heaven, they were not governing properly. They were not really taking over and making the decisions that were good for the dynasty, and that made it weak. Large size, too large of a territory to effectively rule. So the Shang dynasty, they had a very large territory as well. However, the king had siblings who kind of helped him take over other pieces of land in his name. Here, because it was more centralized control, he wanted to be the one in power. He was one person, and one person cannot rule such a large piece of land without any help. So the fact that it was too big and he wanted all of the control, that it ended up being one of his weaknesses. Feudalism, which increased power of local elite families, which weakened the central government. So there was one king. However, they were elite families under them that were very like important too. So if under the king there's many families who believe they have power, that kind of took away power from the king. So at some point, if all of the families, all of these elite families got together and say, no, we don't want this king anymore, like we're gonna put one of us, then that ended up pretty much kicking the king out, and they were having, because they were increased in power, they were probably able to do that later on. Right, so these are some of their accomplishments and developments. These are some of the things that either they created, or they've been able to successfully conduct. Extended territory of the Shang to the Shangzi River Valley. This territory became known as the Middle Kingdom. So, in addition to the property that the Shang had, they extended it from the Yellow River to the Shangzi. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Shangzi River. So they even expanded it even more. So the Zhou Dynasty was even bigger than the Shang Dynasty, and that territory was known as the Middle Kingdom. So that was one of their accomplishments, the fact that they became so big. They promoted greater cultural and linguistic unity among the people of different regions. So the Shang Dynasty had their own, I don't want to call it the alphabet, but they had their own writing system. And what the Zhou Dynasty did is they kind of used that and molded it to make it not a universal language, but they were able to use that writing system to get in contact and to talk to different people from different places. Began focusing on ideas of central government. So central government is pretty much one person or one family in charge. So they started coming up with a few rules and focusing on those ideas rather than having multiple people govern. The philosopher Confucius was born during this period, leading to the development of Confucianism. So for those of you who have never heard of Confucius or Confucianism, so this is a philosopher, and what a philosopher does is he uses his wisdom and the things that he's gone through, and he kind of has like a realization, and there are certain things that he identifies and calls out and kind of like has people eventually follow. So it's not a set of rules, it's not really a religion, but it's kind of like a belief. So the philosopher Confucius later developed Confucianism. In the next video, I'm going to go on and talk about Confucianism, what it is and what it did. By 400 BC, the Zhou had weakened and the kings became figureheads. Regional rulers fought for power. This period became known as the era of the warring states. So the land was so big that they kind of had regional rulers. So in addition to just one king, there was a bunch of people under him that eventually were fighting for the power. And that's what this was known as, the era of the warring states, because they were kind of just at war within each other. By 226 BC, the Zhou dynasty had fallen. It was replaced by the Qin dynasty. So the Qin dynasty is not something we're talking about in the next video, but we will be talking about it in the video after that. So that is the dynasty that followed the Zhou dynasty. So far we have the Shang, we have the Zhou, and the Qin. And this is something that I remember of when I was in 11th grade. Was it 11th grade? When did we take world history? 10th grade? 10th grade, right? I had to be in 10th grade. So I took an AP class, which is a college class for world history, and he kind of gave us a song. So we're learning the dynasties. And I remember, they can hear me. It's recording. Whatever. Then go away. So it was a song, and it was like Shang Zhou Qin Han, Shang Zhou Qin Han, Sui Tang. I don't know. It was like a bunch of dynasties, but so far we're only going to be talking about 3. So then I'll talk about Confucianism in the next video. And here I wanted to show you really quick. We were talking about the land between the Shang and the Zhou dynasty and how they were different in size. So the purple one here is the Shang dynasty. So this is how big the Shang dynasty was. I remember, we had mentioned how this one had taken over where the Yellow River was. So it invaded a lot of the civilizations, a lot of the societies here towards the Yellow River. But when it came to the Zhou dynasty, it expanded to the Yangtze River, which is the Chang one here. So it expanded all the way down to this river as well. So this was the size of the Zhou River.